Hello everybody, I'm Michael from HowtoChess.
And I'm Willie.
Today, we're going to show you how to checkmate with just a bishop and a knight. So you might have looked at all the other checkmates, might have learned, but I promise you, this one's going to be a little bit harder than the rest. So the first thing you want to start off with is out of your king and your minor pieces. You just want to move them into the center. The king is going to be the most important one to put in the center first. And then using the rest of your pieces, try to shoulder them off. Now, don't lose any of your minor pieces, because that's going to make a draw. And something you might notice is as I'm bringing my king into the center, this king is always trying to stay towards the light squared corners. This is because when you have a bishop and a knight, you can only ever checkmate on the same color complex corner as your bishop. So because we have a dark squared bishop, we'll only be able to checkmate on either this corner or this corner. And that's why the king is running towards those light squared corners. So here, we just want to keep pushing our pieces and trying to shoulder the king towards one of those corners. See, you can see he's running towards that corner. There we go. You almost have him there. Now when you're in this position, you just want to keep your king here. And if you notice, now if my bishop wasn't here, I'd move my bishop to the specific square. And that's because it's controlling this diagonal, and that stops the king from escaping from down here. So it's safe to bring out my knight. Now I want you to notice something. Because we're trying to checkmate here, the king's always going to try to stay away from me. And that means we're going to have to force the king to this dark squared corner by ourselves. Now, how are we going to do that? With this knight right here. Now, I want you to, if you remember nothing from this video, then I just want you to remember this. So, if you want to checkmate with knight and bishop, the most important rule is going to be this W you have to make with the knight. Because as you're checkmating, your knight is going to have to start from this square here and move this square here. And what will happen is it'll move here, 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 and it'll create a W. And from this position, after your knight moves all the way to G7, in our case, you will get your checkmate. So, how are we going to move our knight to C7, square we want? I think one route could be, we don't want to move here, so knight here, and there. That should be our quickest way to move to C7. Let's start. Notice how this move also blocks this square. And it's not like the black king can do anything. Now, this is where it starts to become a little autopilot. The hardest part is over. Now, there's only one way to prevent the king going back here. And it's going to be bringing this bishop here. So, now what happens to many people here is this is where they mess up. They don't know what to do with their pieces, and the black king escapes. 50 moves pass, and it's a draw. But just remember what I told you. Keep going with that knight W. So, let's start it. Notice how it blocks this square, so the king has to keep going in this direction. Now, you're going to slide your king forward, and this is where you're going to have to trust me. You might not believe what I'm saying. We got to complete the knight W. Keep going. Now, sometimes the king will go out, but it didn't this time. I'll show you what happens when the king goes out later. And you just want to keep that king opposition. Now, the king can't go here, because our knight's defending. So, we're going to have to bring this bishop and check the king to cover this square. Now, we're in the same position, except we need a waiting move. Because in the last position, the king was here, and we want to force the king there. So, the best way to make a waiting move in this case is with the bishop. So we just move it back or forward. Normally you want to move your bishop back so it doesn't get in the way of the rest of your pieces. Now, it's the same thing. Keep going with the knight W. Want to block this square? Just move the knight back. Now, this is the second scenario that can happen if you bring the knight back. What you need to do is, trust me, keep continuing the W. Now the king is forced to this square, and you'll move your king right, closer to the knight. Now here, you basically have checkmate in thought. I'm sure some of you may be able to find it, but the easiest way to do it, if you can't, is just move the king to g6, and now look. Black king's going to try to escape from these squares. But, yeah, what did I tell you? Keep the bishop back. It blocks the whole diagonal, and the knight's blocking the only escape route. Now, the black king is going to be stuck in a place where it has two moves, and the biggest thing you need to be careful of is stalemate. Now, by keeping the bishop here and giving the king always giving the king two moves, we basically stop almost all stalemates possible. But there is one. Now, what's going to end up happening is we're going to move our knight to cover this square. The king will move here, and we'll deliver checkmate with the bishop. So this diagonal will have to be free. So, what's one way to have the knight covering this square? Either this square or this square. Now, if we have the knight covering this square, they'll walk this diagonal, and the king will be able to escape. So we don't want that. So let's choose this square. Now, what's the easiest way to move the knight to this square? In our case, from f5 and then to h6. So let's start by doing that. It's not like the black king has anything to do anyways. Now, this is the biggest part. If you go too quickly, you're going to play knight h6, and you're going to stalemate. So, what you have to do, and the second you realize how useful this can be in your other checkmates and your other patterns, it's just so much more helpful to have this in as a tool in your pocket. You want to play a waiting move with your bishop. Now this forces the king back to that g8 square. For now, this comes with a check. And just like that, bishop e2, checkmate. Now to explain that second scenario from earlier. So earlier in that game, when we moved to d6, the black king moved back to d8, which isn't exactly the best thing to do. In this case, what you should do if you're trying to draw the game as black, which if your opponent knows what they're doing, as you saw, it's not happening. But if you want to try to draw the game, you want to go to some place like f7. But if you're white, just gotta trust that W you made with the knight. No matter where the king goes, now I want you to look at this. Let's say the king goes here. Your knight is blocking this square, this square. Your knight is blocking this square and this square. and you just need to bring the bishop to the bottom. And you'll notice the king's escape squares gone. The king's going to move to, let's say, f7. You control more of the escape squares. Where is he going? Move your king closer. He's not going anywhere. And just like that, you basically have that same position. The king's going to be stuck in his loop, just going back and forth. And this time, I'll leave it to you guys to find the checkmate.